Let's move on. It is great news for Hindus and Buddhists in India. In just 2 months, they will be able to trek to Mount Kailash from the Indian territory. Up until now, pilgrims had to travel to Tibet to start their journey.
For centuries, Mount Kailash has stood above the Tibetan plateau like a question carved into stone. It is not the highest mountain in the Himalayas. It has never become a normal destination for climbers. Instead, it has become something far more difficult to define. It is a sacred center, a pilgrimage site, a symbol of the universe, and a place where faith and geography appear to overlap. For religious traditions connect themselves to this mountain. Hindus associate it with Shiva. Buddhists connect it with Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain believed to stand at the center of the universe. Jains and followers of the Bon tradition also regard the region as sacred. Pilgrims do not usually approach Kailash as mountaineers approach an ordinary peak. They do not come to plant a flag at the summit. They walk around it. They pray beside it. They bow toward it. They leave the mountain untouched. But one story claims that a Tibetan monk spent 40 years living near Mount Kailash. According to the legend, he stayed in isolation, studying ancient teachings that were never meant for the outside world. He spoke very little. He allowed almost no visitors to see him. And when he finally understood the secret connected to the mountain, he kept it hidden until the last days of his life. The story says that, just before he died, the monk revealed a final teaching. It was not a map to a hidden chamber. It was not proof of an ancient machine. It was not a message from another civilization. It was a warning about humanity. A warning about what happens when people confuse knowledge with wisdom. A warning about what happens when sacred places are turned into possessions. And a warning about the danger of searching everywhere for answers except within the human mind. But before the story can be accepted, one question must be asked. Was this monk a documented historical figure? Or did later storytellers combine real Tibetan traditions with an imagined guardian of forbidden knowledge? The answer may be less dramatic than a legend. It may also be more important, because even if the monk cannot be proven, the mountain, the pilgrimage, the religious traditions, the restrictions, and the human desire to uncover secrets are all real. And somewhere between those facts and the stories built around them, the last secret of Kailash begins to take shape. Mount Kailash is located in Tibet, in the Himalayas, near Lake Manasarovar. The mountain is considered sacred by Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and the Bon tradition. Its importance does not come from a single story or a single community. Instead, Kailash exists within several different sacred landscapes, each with its own traditions, symbols, and explanations. For Hindu devotees, Kailash is associated with Shiva. In Buddhist traditions, the mountain is connected with Mount Meru, a sacred cosmic center described in Buddhist teachings. Jain traditions connect the region with important religious history, while Bon traditions also treat the mountain and the surrounding landscape as spiritually significant. These traditions do not describe Kailash in exactly the same way, but they share an important idea. Mount Kailash is not simply a physical object. It is a place filled with spiritual meaning. Pilgrims traditionally complete a ritual journey around the mountain. In Tibetan Buddhist practice, this journey is known as a kora. The purpose is not to reach the summit. The act of circling the mountain becomes the central religious experience. Some pilgrims walk the route. Others perform repeated full-body prostrations. They lower themselves to the ground, stand again, take another step, and repeat the movement. They continue for hours, days, or even longer. A journey that could otherwise be measured only by distance becomes a physical expression of devotion. The difference between climbing an ordinary mountain and circling a sacred mountain is important. A climber usually measures success by reaching the highest point. A pilgrim may measure the journey through endurance, prayer, humility, and intention. Mount Kailash has no verified successful human ascent in the sources available for this investigation. Modern climbing is also prohibited because of the mountain's religious significance and official restrictions. The mountain remains famous partly because it has not been transformed into another conquered summit. For thousands of years, many people have looked at mountains as challenges. They have measured their height, studied their routes, and attempted to reach their highest points. Mount Kailash presents a different kind of challenge. It asks whether a person can stand before something powerful without trying to own it. The region is also difficult to access. Travelers may require permits, and visiting Western Tibet can involve complex arrangements and official restrictions. This limited access has helped create a space where stories can grow. When outsiders cannot easily examine a place, rumors often move faster than evidence. A remote monastery can become a hidden library. A mountain cave can become an underground kingdom. A local story can become proof of a lost civilization. A spiritual teaching can be transformed into a secret message. That does not mean every story is false. It means every story must be examined carefully. The meaning of Mount Kailash is debated because religious traditions are not always simple historical records. A sacred text may describe a cosmic mountain, the home of a deity, a spiritual axis, or a place of liberation. These descriptions may be interpreted symbolically, geographically, or devotionally. Some people believe that Mount Meru should be understood as a literal location. Others understand it as a cosmological symbol. Some interpret the stories surrounding Kailash as evidence that ancient people were describing a real but misunderstood landscape. Others argue that the religious meaning should not be reduced to physical measurements or archaeological claims. There is also debate about how different traditions influenced one another. Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Bon communities developed their own religious histories, but their sacred geographies sometimes overlap. Researchers must be careful when comparing these traditions. Similar symbols do not automatically prove that one tradition copied another. Differences do not prove that the traditions had no historical contact. The same caution applies to the word ancient. A story may be old without remaining unchanged. Religious traditions are passed through texts, oral teaching, rituals, pilgrimages, translations, and personal interpretation. Over time, details can be preserved, transformed, or given new meanings. This is where the story of the 40-year monk becomes uncertain. The tale may have been inspired by real traditions of Tibetan Buddhist retreat. Tibetan religious history includes monks who live for long periods in isolated hermitages and mountain retreats. Some dedicated their lives to meditation, prayer, study, and silence. But that does not automatically prove that one specific monk lived for exactly 40 years on Mount Kailash and left behind a verified final confession. No verified source examined for this script establishes the monk's full name, the exact location of his retreat, the identity of his monastery, or the existence of a confirmed manuscript containing his last secret. That distinction is important. It means the story should not be presented as a proven biography. It should be understood as a speculative narrative built around a real mountain, real religious traditions, real pilgrimage practices, and a long history of spiritual retreat. The mystery begins with a contradiction. Mount Kailash is one of the most famous sacred mountains in the world, yet the details of daily life in its most remote surroundings remain difficult for outsiders to verify. Pilgrims arrive. Travel companies publish routes. Filmmakers record the landscape. Religious teachers speak about the mountain, but the deeper spiritual traditions connected to remote meditation sites are not always visible to visitors. A modern traveler may see a trail, a monastery, a shrine, or a prayer flag. A lifelong practitioner may see a landscape filled with layers of meaning that cannot be understood through a photograph. This creates the first gap in the story. If a monk spent 4 decades in isolation near Kailash, who recorded his life? Where are his writings? Which monastery knew him? Who were his teachers? Was his story preserved in Tibetan, Chinese, Sanskrit, or another language? Was it first told by a pilgrim, a journalist, a religious teacher, or a modern internet channel? Without answers to those questions, the identity of the monk remains uncertain. The second mystery involves the mountain itself. Many popular stories describe Kailash as a place that cannot be climbed because of supernatural forces. The verified explanation is more grounded. The mountain is sacred. Access is restricted. Climbing is prohibited. The terrain is dangerous. Those facts are enough to explain why the summit has not become a normal climbing objective. But a grounded explanation does not remove the emotional mystery. A mountain can remain mysterious because it is difficult to reach. It can remain sacred because people agree not to treat it as an object of conquest. It can remain powerful because the meaning placed upon it is stronger than any measurement. The third mystery concerns the phrase last secret. A final confession is one of the most powerful structures in storytelling. It creates urgency. It suggests that knowledge was hidden for decades and revealed only when death was near. This pattern appears in legends, religious biographies, family stories, and tales about government secrecy. But it also creates a serious problem. The closer a story comes to claiming a hidden document, a lost teaching, or a forbidden testimony, the more important the evidence becomes. A dramatic final message is not proof. A repeated claim on the internet is not independent confirmation. A mysterious photograph is not an archaeological discovery. The question is not whether the story sounds ancient. The question is whether its evidence can survive careful examination. This is where the monk's supposed secret begins to change meaning. It may not be a secret about a hidden object at all. It may be a secret about the act of searching. The breakthrough in this investigation does not come from opening a secret chamber. It comes from changing the method. Modern researchers can study remote landscapes through satellite images, digital elevation models, aerial photography, and other forms of remote sensing. These tools can reveal patterns that are difficult to see from the ground. A narrow ridge may reveal evidence of an old path. A group of structures may become clearer from above. A landscape that appears empty may contain traces of human movement. But remote sensing has strict limits. Satellite images can show shapes, paths, shadows, changes in vegetation, and visible structures. They cannot automatically determine whether a shape is a monastery, a natural rock formation, or a modern construction. An image can suggest where researchers should look. It cannot replace fieldwork, dating, excavation, or local knowledge. LiDAR can also help archaeologists detect features hidden beneath vegetation or uneven ground. In other parts of the world, this technology has been used to identify possible archaeological features. But mountainous terrain, snow, clouds, image resolution, and limited access can make interpretation difficult. A computer may identify a pattern without understanding its cultural meaning. The same caution applies to artificial intelligence. AI can compare images, organize large collections of texts, recognize repeated visual patterns, and assist with optical character recognition. It may help researchers sort damaged manuscripts or identify similar symbols across documents. It can help translate or classify material, but its output depends on the quality of the training data and the condition of the source. AI cannot look at an unclear manuscript and know with certainty who wrote it. It cannot prove that a legend is true. It cannot determine whether a religious symbol refers to a physical location or a spiritual idea. It cannot replace a trained historian, linguist, archaeologist, or member of the tradition being studied. If AI were applied to texts connected with Kailash, the most responsible result would not be a sensational declaration. It would be a set of possibilities. The system might identify repeated words connected with mountains, silence, retreat, mind, teachers, or pilgrimage. It might compare writing styles or locate passages that appear to come from different periods. It might reveal that a supposed ancient secret is actually a modern composition using older vocabulary. That would not destroy the mystery. It would clarify the boundary between the old material and the new story. In the case of the 40-year monk, the strongest breakthrough may therefore be a negative one. No verified source examined for this story establishes the existence of a specific Tibetan monk who lived on Mount Kailash for exactly 40 years and made a documented deathbed revelation. That absence matters. It means the story should not be presented as confirmed history. It should be presented as a speculative narrative shaped by real beliefs, real pilgrimage traditions, real geographical restrictions, and the long history of mountain hermits in Tibetan religious culture. The hidden secret may not be inside a cave. It may be inside the way the story was created. Once the legend is separated from the evidence, the disagreement becomes more complicated. Religious believers may argue that a sacred truth cannot be judged only by modern academic standards. A teaching can be real in the life of a community, even if it cannot be measured in a laboratory. A monk may pass wisdom through oral instruction rather than publish a formal record. A pilgrimage may change a person without producing evidence that an archaeologist can place in a database. Historians and archaeologists may respond that spiritual importance and historical verification are different questions. A community can preserve a meaningful tradition, but a documentary that makes a factual claim still has to identify its sources. If a monk allegedly lived for 40 years at a remote location, researchers would need names, dates, records, witnesses, manuscripts, or a traceable chain of testimony. Neither side has to be treated as dishonest. The disagreement may come from different ideas about what counts as knowledge. There is also a practical problem. Access to the Kailash region is not simple. Travel can require permits, and the area is subject to restrictions. This can make independent investigation difficult. It can also encourage speculation, because a lack of access is easily mistaken for evidence of concealment. But limited access does not prove a secret cover-up. It may reflect border controls, religious protection, environmental concerns, military sensitivity, or ordinary government regulation. The reasons may be debated, but the existence of restrictions alone cannot establish that officials are hiding a supernatural discovery. This is where responsible storytelling must slow down. A documentary can say that some people allege hidden chambers exist. It can explain why an inaccessible mountain encourages those claims. It can compare satellite images, travel accounts, religious texts, and archaeological standards. But it should not turn an allegation into a fact. The supposed monk's final secret also creates tension between experience and evidence. Perhaps he never intended to reveal a physical secret. Perhaps his final teaching was a warning against turning sacred places into entertainment. Perhaps the story was created by someone who understood that a mysterious monk would be more compelling than a discussion about attention, silence, and spiritual discipline. If that is true, then the secrecy may not have belonged to the monk. It may have belonged to the storyteller. The longer the investigation continues, the more the original claim changes. The question moves away from, what did the monk discover? And it moves toward a more difficult question, why does the world want him to have discovered something? There are several possible explanations. The most conventional explanation is that the monk is part of a modern legend. The story may combine several real elements: Tibetan mountain hermits, Buddhist retreat traditions, the religious importance of Kailash, restricted access to Western Tibet, and the popular belief that the mountain contains a deeper secret. Over time, those elements may have been shaped into a single dramatic biography. The monk becomes a guardian. The mountain becomes a locked door. The final teaching becomes a revelation. Under this interpretation, there is no need for a hidden chamber or impossible technology. The story survives because it expresses a familiar human idea. A person who spends decades seeking truth eventually discovers that the search itself was misguided. The mountain does not need to contain an object for the story to carry meaning. A second interpretation is that the story should be read symbolically. Tibetan Buddhist traditions include long periods of retreat and solitary practice. A mountain hermitage can represent a deliberate withdrawal from distraction. In that context, 40 years may function less as a verified biography and more as a symbol of discipline, patience, and distance from ordinary life. The monk's final secret may therefore be a teaching about the mind. Kailash represents the goal that people believe will complete them. They imagine that peace will arrive when they reach the next place, obtain the next object, learn the next secret, or defeat the next obstacle. But the monk discovers that the sacred mountain is not a possession to be captured. The journey around it becomes a lesson in humility. The pilgrim does not conquer the mountain. The pilgrim changes the relationship with the desire to conquer. This interpretation fits the broader religious symbolism of pilgrimage, but it still does not prove that the specific monk existed. A third interpretation proposes that the legend may preserve a distorted memory of a real person. Perhaps an unnamed monk lived for many years in a remote retreat. Perhaps he studied texts connected with the Kailash region. Perhaps travelers heard a teaching from him and later expanded the story. In this version, the core may be historical, while the exact number of years, the location, and the final confession became uncertain through repetition. This kind of process is possible in oral storytelling, but possibility is not proof. Without a name, a record, a manuscript, or independent testimony, the theory remains unverified. The skeptical position is simpler. There may never have been a monk who spent 40 years on Mount Kailash. The entire premise may have been created for a modern audience that prefers stories about lost wisdom, hidden documents, and forbidden places. The title may be designed to create curiosity rather than report a verifiable event. But this does not make every part of the story false. Mount Kailash is real. The pilgrimage traditions are real. The religious associations are real. The restrictions are real. The history of Tibetan spiritual practice is real. A collection of real details can still be arranged into a fictional narrative. That may be what happened here. The audience is left with several possibilities, but none should be confused with confirmation. The conventional explanation is supported by the lack of verified evidence. The spiritual interpretation gives the story symbolic power. The alternative historical theory remains possible but unproven. The skeptical position warns against accepting dramatic claims without reliable sources. The mystery survives because the evidence is incomplete. The story matters even if the monk cannot be identified. It matters because Mount Kailash reveals a conflict that exists far beyond Tibet. Modern culture often treats every unknown thing as a problem waiting for a solution. Mountains become challenges. Ancient texts become codes. Sacred places become destinations for photographs. Religious symbols become clues in a search for hidden technology. There is nothing wrong with curiosity. Curiosity has helped humanity understand astronomy, medicine, language, history, and the natural world. But curiosity can become possession when it refuses to accept limits. A sacred mountain creates an uncomfortable boundary. It says that not everything must be climbed. Not every mystery must be opened. Not every place exists for a visitor's achievement. That idea can be difficult for a society built around access. People are told that more information will make them wiser. They are encouraged to record every experience, explain every tradition, and turn every unknown location into content. Yet information does not automatically produce understanding. A person can know the height of a mountain without understanding why millions of people refuse to climb it. A person can study the route of a pilgrimage without understanding what it means to walk that route as an act of devotion. A person can translate a word for silence without experiencing what silence does to the mind. This is why the imagined monk remains powerful. He represents the possibility that wisdom may not look like a discovery. It may look like restraint. His secret may be that the most important lesson was never hidden by the mountain. It was hidden by human impatience. The story also raises a difficult question about documentation. If an experience is not written down, does it become less real? If a spiritual transformation leaves no archaeological object, should it be dismissed? Academic research requires evidence because evidence protects people from error. But evidence does not measure every form of meaning. The challenge is to hold both ideas at once. A religious experience can be meaningful without proving a supernatural claim. A legend can contain moral truth without being a verified biography. A sacred landscape can deserve respect without being evidence of lost technology. The most responsible version of the story does not mock believers, and it does not surrender to sensationalism. It allows the mountain to remain sacred for those who worship it, historically complex for scholars, physically dangerous for travelers, and mysterious for everyone who looks at it from a distance. In the end, the monk's supposed final secret may change everything only if the audience understands what it is really changing. It changes the role of the mystery. The mystery is no longer a locked chamber waiting to be opened. It becomes a mirror. For generations, Mount Kailash has remained surrounded by stories. Some describe it as the home of a god. Others connect it with the center of the universe. Some pilgrims approach it through prayer, while others see it through the language of history, geography, or archaeology. The story of a Tibetan monk who spent 40 years beside the mountain may never be confirmed. No verified source establishes the identity of the monk, the exact length of his retreat, or the existence of a final secret preserved in a hidden manuscript. But the absence of proof does not end the question. It changes the question. Perhaps the monk was a real person whose story was transformed by time. Perhaps he was a symbolic figure created to express an older teaching. Perhaps the story was entirely modern, built from real traditions and shaped for an audience hungry for mystery. Each explanation leaves something unresolved. Why has Mount Kailash inspired so many traditions across different communities? Why do pilgrims circle the mountain instead of treating its summit as a prize? Why do modern audiences continue to search for secret chambers, lost technology, and forbidden knowledge in places whose deepest meaning may be spiritual rather than physical? And if the final teaching was never about what lies inside the mountain, what would happen if the mountain's true purpose was to reveal what lies inside the person looking at it? The monk's last secret may not be that Kailash contains a hidden world. It may be that human beings keep inventing hidden worlds because they are uncomfortable with the silence of the real one. The mountain remains where it has always stood, surrounded by faith, restrictions, unanswered questions, and snow. The final mystery is still open. Was the secret hidden by the mountain, or was it hidden by the people who came looking for it? The answer may depend on what each person believes the mountain is saying. To some, Mount Kailash is a sacred place. To others, it is an unsolved historical mystery. To others, it is a symbol of the human mind. And perhaps to some, it is something that cannot be explained at all. What does Mount Kailash represent to you? Is it a place of faith, a mystery of history, a symbol of silence, or a mirror of the human desire to find answers?